want to tell you guys a story. So once there was a guy who was traveling from one city to the next, and as he's walking down the road, a group of men jump him from behind and beat him. They steal everything that he has. They leave him laying in the street half dead. Well, someone from his city comes along later, and they see him laying there bleeding. He needs help. He has nothing. And instead of helping him, they cross to the other side of the street, move as far away from him as possible in order to go about their way. The man continues to lay there when a second man comes by, sees him laying in the street. Maybe this man will help him out. He too is from the same place. Instead, same result as the first guy. Moves from one side of the road to the other, putting the most distance possible between them, so he definitely doesn't have to help. Finally, a third guy comes from a neighboring city, one that doesn't quite get along with the guy from the first city. He sees him laying in the road. You would think that this would be the guy that would walk on, say, "No thanks, we don't get along, I'm not helping you." Instead, he does something crazy. He bandages his wounds. He takes him into the city for help. He pays for his help, his care. He makes sure that this man gets back on his feet, even though they weren't friends. In fact, they were enemies. You've probably already caught on to the fact that this is the parable of the Good Samaritan from Luke chapter 10. Now, someone had asked Jesus how they could inherit eternal life, and Jesus responds by telling him the commandments, one of which being to love your neighbor as yourself. So the person responds with, "Well, how do I know who my neighbor is?" So that's where this parable comes in. Jesus chooses to have a Jew be helped by a Samaritan. Why is this important? Well, you see, the Jews and the Samaritans had fought for years, having a political and religious divide between them. They did not like each other in the least bit. Yet, this is who Jesus uses to tell everyone listening, this is your neighbor. He ends it by saying, "So who do you think your neighbor is?" And the person says, "Well, it's the one who helped the man who needed help." And Jesus says, "Yes, now go and do likewise." What an outstanding picture he paints for us. Not only is he teaching us to love one another, but he's saying this doesn't apply just to those who you care for, who you like, who you love, your family, your friends. He says, no. This also applies to your enemies. I'm commanding you to love all people, to help all people. All people are your neighbor. Now go and do likewise. Jesus adds to this in Matthew chapter 5 when he tells us to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us, to bless those who curse us. This also applies when Paul gives us the challenge in Philippians 2 to consider others as more important than ourselves. Paul doesn't preface it by saying, as long as you're friends, consider others as more important than yourselves. No, that's not what he says. He says, consider others, your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, people you've never met. Anyone on earth counts. Consider them as more important than yourself. It's a lot harder, though, when we don't get along, isn't it? When you look at someone and you say, "I don't like you. I don't want good things to happen to you. I definitely don't want to be the person who helps those good things happen to you." I mean, that would be like Superman helping Lex Luthor, Batman helping the Joker. It just doesn't happen. But the good thing about those stories, those are made up. They don't have the same challenge from Jesus that we do. Jesus tells us, I don't care if they're your arch enemy, if they're your best friend, if they hurt you, if they spite you, if they curse you. My command is to love them and to consider them as more important than yourselves. So that's the challenge this week. Find those who you don't get along with and find a way to love them like Jesus would, to consider their needs above your own. It's not just a request, it's a command. And you might be thinking to yourself, I don't think I can do that. I don't have the humility to help those who hurt me. Well, guess what? You don't have to do it alone. Keep reading in Philippians and read, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Christ commands us to do it, but he also stays with us the entire time, giving us the strength, the hope, the perseverance to get through it. We don't have all the answers, but thankfully, God allows himself to be part of our solution. Will you do it with me this week? Will you take the P2 challenge?